listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the college football Week 15 betting odds preview for Thursday, December 5th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
Well, it is terrifying just how fast the year rolls by in all sports and just the year in general. Maybe it's a function of age. Maybe it just really goes fast. Brian Blessing and Bruce Marshall from the legendary publication The Gold Sheet. We're in Las Vegas, and we're fired up and ready to go. College football, conference championship games, and just an overview. Bruce, first of all, good morning. How you doing?
Hey, pretty good. All of the above, I would check on that as far.
It's terrifying. It's beyond belief, pal. I'm looking at these numbers, Bruce. I guess it is what it is, and we're seeing some dog money. But in essence, every one of these conference championship games, the opener 6.5 or 7 was the lowest. I mean, there's no pick or a 1 or a field goal game. Just like high numbers in these conference championship games. It's a tad on the odd side for me.
Yeah, it is. And the ACC game, that's probably that might be the highest conference championship number I can ever recall, because you're looking 4 touchdowns, even plus 4 touchdowns in the Clemson game. But the way the season has gone, it's just reflecting what happened in the regular season. A lot of these games turned one-sided, and some of these top-ranked teams just stepped on the throat of everybody. Now, I'm kind of curious if some of these powerhouse teams get challenged this week, what happens, because most of them haven't had too many close games to worry about this season, but I'm not necessarily sure that's going to be the case this weekend either.
Well, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, the other thing we do take into account, Bruce, are neutral fields, right? And they should be easy numbers for odds makers to make. Here are our power ratings. You take into account some teams certainly travel much better than others, but basically we're talking neutral field games.
Yeah. We in the big conferences, we are the middle level leagues usually play at home field sites here, so that's a little different than some of the Conference USA, Mountain West, and the American. But you're right. The neutral field thing is these are like bowl games, really, in that regard. So sometimes you have to handicap them a little different.
All right, let's go. The Pac-12 Championship game. With money that seems to have come in on Utah. It's settled in at 6.5 minus a dime. I do think, leading up to the game, we'll see a few 7s here. The total on the game ranges from 46 to 47, so we'll run with 46.5 as the consensus here. The bottom line, Bruce, you sit here and look at Utah sitting in the 5-hole, knowing that Georgia and LSU are playing each other, and I would envision, they got to take care of their own business, but I would think Utah would be big-time LSU fans to win convincingly, and do style points matter here so that Oklahoma doesn't scoot over the top of Utah? You have to take that into account.
Probably so. You need an accomplice for that, which should be Oregon. But yeah, who knows what this committee, and we'll get into them more in a minute, what they're going to be looking at here. But although they've kind of let their intentions be known right away,
yes,
and it's like they're going to try to get the Pac-12 in there this year.
They tipped their hand, didn't they, Bruce? About I guess it was maybe a month ago, 4 weeks ago, where they literally positioned Oregon and Utah, where you said, oh boy, look at that. Showing the Pac-12 a little bit of love. It was almost like, well, it sure looks like they'd like to get one of those teams in there.
Well, yeah, and it's been a few years since the Pac-12's been in there, and you look at what Utah or Oregon, especially Utah, compared to, quality wins versus, say, Oklahoma. No, Utah's not there, but it looks like they're going to make an excuse here to get a Pac-12 in there if they can help it. Now, both of these teams, Utah and Oregon, especially Utah, I think are bully teams. And I think if Utah, I almost like to see them get in the Final Four. They'll get very exposed there, but that's what they are. They are a bully. So's Oregon. And when you go out and you run up 77 points on a team like Nevada, like Oregon did, and enjoy doing it.
But let me ask you, because Oregon's defense for like a 4 or 5 week stretch in the first third of the season. Like, wow, okay, we think Oregon track meet City up and down the field, but their defense was playing at a ridiculous level. The bottom line is Utah's defense has just been a stud all year long.
Oh, yeah.
How good is this defense?
Yeah, Utah's defense is very good, very rugged. And Oregon's defense, though, I mean, they were really good against lousy offenses. I mean, teams were moving. The better offenses moved pretty freely against Oregon and caught a break last week when Oregon State's quarterback was out. Jake Luton didn't play in that game. So, I mean, that precluded a chance at Oregon State upsetting. Utah's defense, though, is big and rough, and they beat you up front. And they turn you one-dimensional, and they're very tough to run against. At least, these Pac-12 teams, a lot of them can't run. They don't against Utah. So I'm not sure Oregon's going to be able to establish something. Oregon did look like the wind was out of its sails last week against Oregon State in the Civil War, though, stemming back to the Arizona State game a couple weeks ago. There's the latest example of an okay offense that moved pretty well against Oregon's defense. I think Utah probably gets the same. Huntley and Moss, I think, are a pretty good combination. And Utah's defense, I think, is a tick above 31-17. Our score forecast, Utes. Then they sit down and watch on Saturday if Georgia can beat LSU.
All right, Bruce, let's go to the MAC championship game. Miami of Ohio, Central Michigan. We're seeing a lot of 6.5. Honestly, I can see this game going through 7. I can see 7.5 popping up. There'll be a boatload of 7s, I think, pop up, and there may be a handful of 7.5s. I really believe that. I mean, if you just go, and this isn't reinventing the wheel, from a current form perspective, Central Michigan's offense has really, put it together at the end of the year. 48, 45, 49 points scored in their last 3 games. And, a bad day is certainly understandable. But if you look at Miami of Ohio's last 2 games, they beat Akron 20-17. You talk about a red flag. That's terrifying. And then they went and got killed by Ball State 41-27. Current form coming in here, Miami's going the wrong way.
Well, yeah, and it was weird though. The Ball State game, Thanksgiving week or that Friday, I rarely have seen a coach do this. Well, I mean, sort of in other sports, but I mean, he took all of his starters out in the second half of that game and was going backups. And much of the game going with backups, they had the MAC East sewn up. But especially the second half, they took Gabbert, their quarterback, out, went with the backup. And it's almost like he wasn't trying to win. But the more red flag was that Akron game before.
That's the scary one, isn't it? Akron couldn't. They'd have had a hard time with a top 5 high school team.
I know. I mean, that was the worst team in the country, and here they are, life and death with them. That is not the case with Central. Jim McElwain, this is his masterpiece here this year. I mean, and after they lost that game 61-0 to Wisconsin back in early September, we thought, okay, we won't even pay much attention to Central Michigan this year. Well, they uncorked spread covers in 9 of the next 10. So they're one of the hottest point spread teams in the country. The Tennessee transfer quarterback Normandy was hurt in September, but he came back, passed for almost 300 yards per game in the MAC. He's got, the offense was tops in the league, 515 per game. You mentioned Miami struggling. They are 10th in the MAC. Pretty good 1-2 punch at running back for Normandy with Ward and Lewis. And they're playing really good. This is Jim McElwain at his best. 37-20 Central. We take them. They'll be well supported there in Ford Field, and they will win the MAC.
Yeah, I'm absolutely on board with that. You have to just, maybe there's some master plan, but current form, I get it. The other thing, and your number there would get this over the total of 54. These MAC games, these teams are capable of going up and down the field on each other in frigid conditions, and it's going to be pristine conditions. Points would be the order of the day for me as well. It's just the nature of the way the games are played in the MAC.
Yep, you could see that clean, dry track in Ford Field in Detroit, and should be well suited for Central to run up and down the field.
All right, another team actually coming in on a dead run and capable of producing points, Louisiana Lafayette. And they're taking on an App State team who's a 6-point favorite in the game. And this is it's a really good football game team that, boy, and it's funny. you look at it, I mean, we're the things where history repeats itself. They stubbed their toe. They lose 24-21 to Georgia Southern. It was just a quirky thing. They lose, and then they're able to bounce back, which was really impressive, to beat a South Carolina team. This team can flat out play. How is this total, Bruce? Only 56. That's the thing that sticks out to me. I mean, current form for both teams. It's pretty stout. Both teams with really good offenses.
Well, don't forget, I mean, they played a 17-7 game in the regular season. And last year they played twice, including in this game, and they went 54-49.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been a track meet when these teams have faced, so that might have something to do with it. It's at Boone. It's at App. Like I mentioned, they have been beating, though not easily, but winning, and they did cover that game. They were a slight dog in Lafayette back in October. Last year, the 10 and 11-point wins on this field, including the championship game.
Is Louisiana Lafayette, Bruce?
Yeah.
I mean, Appalachian State's coming in here, and you saw their name all year long. They're known as being the giant killer for all these years, but now this is just a really good team, and they were in the rankings. Is Louisiana Lafayette flying really under the radar coming in here?
Yeah, I think they might be. I mean, this is a really good team. They had a chance in that game in midseason, and they really can run the ball. They got a three-headed running back monster, which Mitchell, Calais, and Regis can really run, and they use them all, and they combine for over 2,600 yards. And you've got a quarterback, Lewis, who's pretty good. Threw for almost 2,500 yards and 20 TDs, so they're pretty well balanced. The defense is stout. Now, so is App State, really good, and the quarterback Thomas is a great dual threat. The last 2 years, 45 touchdown passes, just 10 picks, so they're good. Both these coaches might be moving up too. I've heard Billy Napier from Lafayette get mentioned, and Drinkwitz from App State will certainly be on the radar too. So keep an eye on that as well. His predecessor, Scott Satterfield, did very well at Louisville this year. We had it 20-19 App. We think they'll probably win, but plus the points, we'll give the Raging Cajuns a shot. They've been a very good point spread team since early last season, and I think they might be able to hang in this number on Saturday.
All right, bud, let's go to the Big 12 game. Baylor, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's 9. Total on the game, we'll call the consensus 64. And we don't have to go too far back. November 16th, Baylor's got the game in their back pocket, needed about 3 first downs in the second half to win the game, and Oklahoma comes from the grave to beat them. And, now Oklahoma in the catbird seat with an opportunity to kick the door down and be one of the Final Four. The funny thing is that game, Bruce, was all about adjustments at halftime, and Baylor's got to be kicking themselves the way they let them get away from them. To their credit, they bounced back. It wasn't pretty. They beat Texas, and then they drilled a Kansas team. I'm going to go, I don't know if it's outside the box thinking. The one thing I would say is that whatever Baylor was doing, they had it scripted, and it went swimmingly. And then and I don't know if it was a function of taking their foot off the pedal and terrific adjustments that Oklahoma made. But honestly, to me, the safest way to play this game, I'll go on the premise Baylor comes out of the gate strong again, and I'm going to take Baylor plus 5.5 in the first half, and then maybe see what's shaking at the intermission and think that that was a total quirky thing, that they made great adjustments, and then Baylor got away from what they were doing well. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here, and hey, listen, I don't know about the game, but I'm going to take the points in the first half.
Yeah, that's how that would have worked the first time. That could happen again. I think Oklahoma's going to get them, but if they do it, they probably wear Baylor down in the second half and do it. This is an earlier kickoff on Saturday, so the SEC game will be later. The parlay that Baylor needs, or actually either of these teams need, is Oregon to beat Utah Friday night. That would make this a lot more interesting. And then
that's a good point.
Yeah, and then this LSU Georgia game isn't until later on Saturday. But be that as it may, Oklahoma should have an argument, especially Oklahoma, or maybe in Baylor some too. But to leapfrog the Pac-12, and beating the teams. Oklahoma won at Baylor. They won at Oklahoma State. They beat Texas on a neutral field. None of those games were at Norman. And just one loss. The defense has played better down the stretch. It played better beginning the second half of the Baylor game. Shut out the Bears in the second half, and it was the stop unit really turned the tide in that game. A mere 103 yards of offense for Baylor after the intermission. Benito, the linebacker, made the game-saving interception on that last Baylor drive. And, of course, as you know, Oklahoma came roaring back. Baylor has won a lot of close games this year, and Brewer, the quarterback, the only game he really that he faltered in the clutch was that loss at Waco. But that may weigh on the Bears. And I get the feeling Oklahoma, one of his best games of the year last week, shutting down Chuba Hubbard and Oklahoma State in Bedlam at Stillwater. Very impressive. 36-23 Oklahoma. I think they're going to win it and cover the number. Might take them till the second half, like you say, but I think the Sooners actually have a chance to crash the party once again.
All right, we go to the Conference USA Championship game, Bruce, with UAB and Florida Atlantic, and we're looking at Florida Atlantic, 7.5, 8-point favorites. Total on the game, consensus 49.5. Is it this simple? Something's got to give. UAB's defense against Florida Atlantic's high-powered offense. What wins out?
Yeah, and I think it's key here, too. We want to see if UAB's quarterback, Johnson, is going to play, although he hasn't played much. He's had very limited work game against North Texas last week. That's his only work in the last month. And Hopkins, the backup, is serviceable. He's not spectacular. The big deal for UAB was getting their top running back, Spencer Brown, back the second half of the season. He had 111 last week when they sewed up the CUSA West against North Texas last week. He had 156 in this game last year that UAB won at Middle Tennessee. So they've gone down the road and won. Bill Clark, one of our favorite coaches, he should be on the short list for any of these openings at Missouri or anywhere else in the SEC or in the region. Except I think he's an Alabama guy. He coached high school there. Jacksonville State is in state, and UAB. I'm not sure he wants to leave, but somebody ought to give him a call. Same maybe even for Lane Kiffin, who's got Florida Atlantic back on flying high, second time in the championship game 3 years. Robinson, the quarterback, is a good playmaker. Davidson, the freshman running back from Kissimmee, where my daughter lives, he came on and made a very, very nice impression this season. So Kiffin's team looked about like it did a couple of years ago. The hope for UAB is they can run the ball like Marshall did, was the one other Conference USA team that really can run the ball and really hurt Florida Atlantic in a midseason game with its infantry. There's where Spencer Brown comes in handy. 28-26. Here's one. We're going to take the points with UAB. I'm not sure they're going to win this thing outright. Kiffin probably wins, but we will take UAB plus the points.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, Bruce, now this is really intriguing. Cincinnati and Memphis, they played last week. You just don't see this very often. Memphis wins the game 24-14. Memphis is a 9.5 point favorite. Total on the game is 57.5. You tell me what you're thinking, but I look at it. The game last week, Memphis had to win the game. Cincinnati knew they were in this game. Their dominoes had to fall a certain way. But I'm going to go on the premise that Cincinnati, knowing they may very well play these guys again the next week, I'm not saying they weren't trying to win the football game, but I've got a funny feeling, and maybe both teams, they might have kept a lot of things under wraps, and knowing they're going to play again. And I just, it's odd. It's one of those bizarre things where football teams playing back-to-back games. Total in the game's 57. I think the game goes over the total. We know Memphis can light it up. I think Cincinnati, if you would say, I don't know that you can make this crazy a parallel, but in preseason games, conceivably there have been teams that played each other in a preseason game and then played in week 1 or week 2 of the NFL. And by nature in preseason football, I'm just saying they maybe keep things very vanilla and don't show anything. I think both teams are going to roll out a lot of stuff this week that they didn't show last week, and I think it's going to produce points.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a surprise. And don't forget, last year we saw a situation like this, a quick rematch, and it was actually in Conference USA, and we referred to it a moment ago when UAB played Middle Tennessee and actually went to Murfreesboro and won after losing 27-3 the week before. So I think, yeah.
And what was the score of the next game?
It was 27-25. It was a little higher scoring.
It's apples and watermelons. But when they played back to back, both teams, it was a higher scoring game.
It was, but the other thing was, Cincinnati, like UAB last year, the second game, it was a much different effort, the second game than the first game, knowing that's the one they had to win. Now, it might have messed up Cincinnati getting in the New Year's Six. And that's probably going to be Memphis, the only chance. And funny thing for this league, it would be much bigger for Memphis to win, and there's a much bigger paycheck for Memphis and the league playing in the Cotton Bowl, which is where they would play if they win this game. I think Memphis wins and covers this one, though, because Cincinnati has been hurting, though, the second half of the season, and Ritter, the quarterback, is not 100%, and they've had several close escapes. Memphis is 11-5-1 versus spread. Its last 17 here at the Liberty Bowl. 38-24 Memphis. I think this game is going to be close for a good while. Memphis pulls away late and probably gets over that total you mentioned.
Just because it's what we do, always looking ahead. The bowl projection for Memphis, as you alluded to, is the Cotton Bowl. And as of today, the projections, they would play either Baylor or Auburn. Is this team, plant the seed now, is this team, if they win, is this team good enough? And motivation would be, yeah, they'll love being at the Cotton Bowl. But is this team good enough to win the next game?
Yeah, just like UCF 2 years ago beat Auburn, in Atlanta, and darn near beat LSU last year. So, yes, it is. One other note about this, especially the Memphis side here. Don't be surprised if Mike Norvell is not coaching the team in the bowl game. This is one of the things you hate about college football. He is on the radar, short list at a few places like Florida State. And maybe if they hire him, and I think they might, maybe they'll let him coach the bowl like UCF did with Scott Frost a couple of years ago. But just keep an eye on that situation as well.
All right, Bruce, we go to the Mountain West, and you've got Hawaii playing in the Mountain West Championship game, which I'm sure they're thrilled about, but they can't be thrilled to go to the Blue Field and to the mainland. And we're seeing Boise State laying 14, total 64. These two teams did play earlier in the year, and it was Track Meet City, 59-37. Now, that was October 12th. Weather is a lot different at that time of the year. I don't know. Hawaii walking in here, playing musical chairs at quarterback, too.
Yeah, they've been rotating. Nick's been rotating McDonald and Cordero, and they've been winning some recent games, although, and the defensive numbers look a little better. Army moved some last week, but they did enough to win defensively, and the defense played very well the weeks before against San Diego State and UNLV, but they haven't faced a really dangerous, sharp-edged dual threat attack, of which neither San Diego State nor UNLV, and certainly not Army, qualify for a while. And Hawaii was getting napalmed many times this season when it faced a big-time offense, allowed more than 50 3 times, including on the blue carpet, that game you mentioned, 59-37. That was an odd game because Bachmeier, the quarterback for Boise, got hurt. And Brian Harsin ended up using 5 different quarterbacks in that game. Cord, the backup, played most of the way, and he had one of his better games of the year. Since then, Henderson has taken over. Jalen Henderson, senior, a good dual threat, and has been actually, because of that, his ability to run has been more dangerous than Cord. They also have not ruled Bachmeier out. He played once limited snaps against San Jose on November 2 with this hip injury. He might be able to play either or. Boise at home is very tough to beat. They did a better job against the spread at home. That had been sort of a problem area for them in the past. And I'm not sure Hawaii's defense is going to carry here. And it's going to be cold in Boise, and it's going to be a foreign situation for Rainbow Warriors. 47-27 Boise on the blue carpet. We think they're going to get there and cover this spread in the Mountain West.
And from a motivation aspect, hey, get a banner and you win the championship, obviously. But in terms of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, there is none. Hawaii is just going to play in the Hawaii Bowl. That always happens. And, good for you, Boise State. Whoop-de-doo. They get to play in the Las Vegas Bowl, which I'm sure they're getting tired of.
Unless now the other kicker here is this is actually going at the same time as Cincinnati, Memphis. If Cincinnati can beat Memphis, Boise,
there's a chance. Yes,
Boise, that game kicks off a half hour earlier. There's a chance Boise gets into the New Year's Six if Cincy wins. In fact, they'd be next in line, so they're going to be a little scoreboard watching in Boise as well.
Well, okay, then okay, good point here. Now, Boise's 19, Cincinnati's 20. You know what, Bruce? If Cincy beats Memphis, they're gonna leapfrog Boise State. I think you just got to cut to the chase there. But Boise State would have to win this. Sasquatch foot, right? Maybe Boise State really is motivated to go out and win this game by 30.
Well, there would be an uproar though, because this team's got one loss and Cincy's got two. And if the committee is going to do that, then you're going to really have a hornet's nest. I'm thinking Boise's in. If Boise or Cincy, and with Cincy with two losses, Boise, but we'll see.
All right. And actually, do you think this was by design? The games start a half an hour apart. So it's not, I guess conceivably they're scoreboard watching.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it adds a little bit more intrigue to the whole thing. Sure.
All right, let's get to it. The SEC championship game. Very interesting. Some places, let's call 7 the consensus, but we're seeing LSU, a couple of places, a 7.5 point favorite, and a couple of places, a 6.5 point favorite. Now, I would think part of the deal here is that some of these individual properties, and we're at that time of year where they could have liability in futures and they're trying to attract certain money on one side or the other. But that's crazy to see two sides of a key number like that. But big boy football.
It is. And, LSU's situation, I think LSU's in the Final Four no matter what happens. This is effectively a quarterfinal game for Georgia, which it was last year against Alabama as well, and gave it a good fight and lost. But, this is pretty much win and you're in. It's a 8-team tournament as far as Georgia's concerned, and this is the first round game. The defense is good enough that it might be able to give LSU an argument here, much like Auburn did. That was the one game that LSU kind of got slowed down. You could sort of see Georgia's defense. The scenario for Georgia is that they fluster Joe Burrow, that they stand up LSU at the line of scrimmage. They turn LSU one-dimensional. Now, that's a great dimension they've got with the Burrow, but they've got the cover guys and speed in the secondary to make LSU sweat a bit. The concern for Georgia is the offense has been very erratic all year, and beating a bad Georgia Tech, scoring 52 last week. In SEC play, this team had scored only 22 per game its last 6. So they're not, the offense has been misfiring too much all year, and Jake Fromm, the quarterback, might be missing some of his top receiving targets as well this week. This just was not a very smooth running offense this year, and though Georgia's got a chance, because of that defense, and beat Florida, beat Auburn in October and in November. They maybe have a chance here, but eventually I think their lack of pop on offense is going to determine this one. And LSU kind of gleefully runs up points, and I think they'll do it again. 37-20, LSU will win, eventually pull away. It'll be close for a while here, but I think the Tigers get them in Atlanta.
All right, Bruce, the Big Ten championship game, Wisconsin, Ohio State. 16.5 is the number. Most places there are 17s. That half point's a big deal, especially with what I'm going to say here. Very reminiscent to me of the Ohio State-Penn State game. We talked that week when they were laying 18 to Penn State. Going, what am I missing? I get they're terrific. Talk about discounting Penn State or dissing Penn State, and Ohio State's running away, and Penn State's backup quarterback brings them in the game. And the game got a little hairy for a while, but Penn State covered that number. the thing, Bruce, I think when you look at this number, this is all to me about it's low-hanging fruit, but not being able to read between the lines. Can Ohio State win this game 42-3 or whatever? Sure. But they played on October 26th, and Ohio State won the game 38-7. So, okay, yeah, they killed them. Well, to me, throw that game out. Wisconsin, the week before that game, in total look-ahead mode, threw away, at the time they felt, their season by losing in ridiculous fashion, 24-23 to Illinois, went to Ohio State, a deflated team, and got mauled. Then they righted the ship. You get by a tough Iowa team, and now the offense is rolling again. But the win at Minnesota, laying only 3, Minnesota had a great season. But Wisconsin is now, to me, what Wisconsin was on October 12th after beating Michigan State 38-0, before the goofy game where they blew it in a look-ahead spot. I know Ohio State's terrific, Bruce, but I think, and on a neutral field here, this is Wisconsin-Ohio State, the game you were hoping you were going to get before they stubbed their toe in that Illinois game. I think Wisconsin's live in this spot. I'm taking the 17.
Yeah, well, that could happen, sure. And a couple other notes, though. One caution here: Ohio State, I think, is more, style points are going to mean something. It looks like this committee, and I go back to the committee again here. They've decided they're going to put Ohio State number 1, and for whatever reason, Big Ten politicking, whatever, they're. I think LSU should be myself, but they've telegraphed this punch. The difference there is, and this is what irks me, is that they're going to put Clemson 3 and probably LSU 2, and the team you don't want to face in the first round is Clemson. This would keep Ohio State apart from Clemson. I don't like that. I'd love to see a team like Clemson get a crack at Ohio State, because this team is a bully on steroids here, and they just jump on you with glee. And I've said all year, I want to see this team when plan A doesn't work, and not many of these teams this year have had to go to plan B, but I want to see how a team reacts when it has to go to plan B. I'm telling you, this team did panic that game against Penn State. All of a sudden, with the backup quarterback, Ohio State started to make some mistakes, and Penn State was moving and had a chance in that game. And Ohio State, you didn't see Ryan Day jumping around on the sideline. He was kind of frozen. But too often this year, they just kind of gleefully go out there. This offense is in high gear all the time. We saw what they did to Michigan last week. Eventually, I think they get there against Wisconsin, although your scenario might be right. And if Wisconsin turns this into a trench fight and can slow Ohio State, they got a chance. But if they lose contact ever, this is where Ohio State won't sit back. Normally, a 16.5 point favorite may back off a little bit. This team usually does not back off, which is why I don't like them really, but it may work in their favor here. We had a 38-16 Buckeyes, but I see the Badger argument there, and I wouldn't be shocked if Wisconsin makes this thing much closer.
Well, I love your description, and we'll see how it plays out. But you know, a bully's a bully until somebody punches the bully in the nose. And if Wisconsin, there's no mystery here, right? I mean, if Wisconsin can just run the ball down their throat and let them know they're in a dogfight, that's how it'll play. Maybe, to your point, though, it's Wisconsin in the first half, getting a balloon number, and then play Ohio State in the second half if, like you say, that they're more than willing to rack it up. Yeah,
and it's rare, though, that a team, unless you're 95 Nebraska, maybe, you just go out there and you just ground up everybody in your path. So maybe that's what Ohio State's going to be this year. I don't know, but I do want to see how they react in a really, when things don't work, plan A doesn't work, and how they can improvise. We haven't seen them really in that situation yet. A little bit of it in the Penn State game, and I didn't like the way they reacted. They did not cover that game. So we'll see what happens this week.
The ACC game, Bruce, crazy number here. Clemson 28.5 against Virginia. Totals 55. In generally, you think of Bronco Mendenhall. He's a defensive guy, but this is a Virginia team that's producing a lot of points, but they can't stop anybody. I would envision And hence, the total, I guess, is if you're looking at the game, I mean, it's a ridiculously high spread. The total kind of seems low to me. And again, reading between the lines here with what we were just talking about with some of the other games, do style points at all matter for Clemson? Because I think you're spot on that, how much can they improve their lot in life here? I mean, there's one way, that's if Wisconsin beat Ohio State and Georgia beat LSU. But your point is, if either one of those teams win, Clemson's locked into the 2 or 3 hole. It's very unlikely they get the 1.
Yeah, and Dabo didn't make any friends with the bowl committee there by his stuff. Saying they don't want us there. Georgia loses to South Carolina, and it's how do they keep Georgia in? He said if we lost to Georgia, they'd put us at number 20. I mean, he's but the only thing is his team believes him, and there's a lot of things to like about Virginia. You mentioned the offense. Perkins, a really good dual threat quarterback, almost 3,000 yards passing, almost 700 yards rushing. He might be in the non-Clemson part of the ACC. He might be the ACC of the MVP of this league. And Mendenhall's defense, it's a Rocky Long design defense. Mendenhall is a Rocky Long protege, and they do a lot of the same things San Diego State does. However, and the defense came up big to win that game against Virginia Tech last week. And first time in 16 years, they beat the Hokies, and Broncos 7-2 his last 9 as an underdog. That is all good to remember in Virginia's bowl game. I don't think any of it matters here because Clemson is so outclassing all these ACC teams. The last 2 years in the conference championship game, total score 80, Clemson, 13 opponents. Those happen to be Miami and Pitt. And by the way, Virginia is the 7th different ACC coastal champ in as many years. So it was finally their turn as the roulette wheel spun and landed on Virginia. But I don't think they slow down. Like Trevor Lawrence is putting up some big numbers in recent weeks. This defense is outstanding. Clemson didn't cover that game against North Carolina, almost lost that one in September. They usually have one close call per year back early in the season, but they stepped on the gas down the stretch. They hit the accelerator, and they've only lost one of their last 15 spread decisions in the ACC. They're just outclassing these teams. 48-13 Clemson, I think, and that's no knock on Virginia. I'll maybe look at them in their bowl game, but just not against these guys in the ACC title.
All right, here, it's got to be part of your handicap, and I don't know the answer to this, but at least it's a discussion to have. The semifinal date for Clemson is December 28th, so it's not like, we're playing a game next week. They're going to have time to prepare. That being said, and I always think about this kind of stuff, March Madness in the NCAA tournament, where, the high-profile teams, they play the first 2 games, and it's the last chance for guys that are on the scout team or the biology major, when a team's a 28-point favorite in a basketball game, at the end of the game, you bring these kids in and you reward them for all the work they've done all season long, and you throw them out there. And that's because they know that's the end of the road, because every game after that's going right down to the wire. Not so much that there's a game next week, Bruce, but I could envision a scenario here where Clemson, in the fourth quarter of this game, they're letting a lot of kids play who aren't going to get a chance to play from this point on, and you kind of reward them to the point where I could see maybe Virginia, putting up a touchdown or 14 points in the fourth quarter. I don't know that backdoor cover, but that would certainly lead me to say I could see the game going over the total when those kind of players get in on the back end.
Oh yeah, that could certainly happen. Although it hasn't much with Clemson, but it could. And you got to remember, and if the game's out of hand, Broncos probably put his backups in too to let them out there to play. But no, we've seen that scenario that you lined out before, so it's possible it could happen that way. It's just these guys, Dabo's sort of done that in some of these games, and they keep winning big. And their backups are pretty darn good, and those kids are good, and they're hungry when they come in. So they're not.
No, which even it makes the point even
for the over. It makes it
for the over. I mean, Clemson's going to keep going, but if Virginia, you're right. If Mendenhall takes his guys out, but it's one of those things too where they don't want to be embarrassed, and he leaves his starters in the fourth quarter. They're going to get points against Clemson's backups.
Yeah, that could certainly be the case. Sure.
That's fun. Good stuff, man. I mean, we made it to the bowl championships, and then our conference championships, and then bowl season, buddy. And we'll have a game every day the rest of the way pretty soon.
Boy, they jam them in there. They don't start till December 21 this year, and they got all of them by like 11. They've jammed like 18 days in recent years into 11, and then we have nearly a 2-week wait for the championship game. So it's a little odd the way when the New Year's falls on a Wednesday. It's a little bit odd. But we'll be talking about all these games, and we'll know on Sunday, by Sunday night, not only the Final Four, but all those other bowl matchups as well.
Well, and that'll be a future discussion we will have, because of how many bowl games are we looking at, Bruce? Is it like 39?
39, I think, yeah.
Of those 39, we'll wrap it up with this, but of those 39, and we don't know the matchups yet, the ballpark, how many of those games will feature teams that could give a rat's patoot? Motivation's a thing. Like, a high profile team. Really, I got to play, the Meineke toilet bowl. You know what I mean? There's going to be 4 or 5 of those games where, this team should kill this team, but they just don't want to be there.
Probably more games than that. We see, and a lot of times there's no crowds at these bowl games too, or very limited. I mean, especially lesser bowls. It's a team from a major conference going to a lesser bowl, and the team is undershot expectations. I mean, wherever Texas ends up in its bowl, a lot of its people aren't going to go this year, and that's just one example. Oftentimes especially those early bowl games, you're playing in front of a studio. It seems like so. You're right.
Bruce Marshall, the legendary publication, The Gold Sheet. Brian Blessing. We love talking college football. Conference Championship week, and our next discussion will be wrapped around bowl season.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.